Hello, this is Shanna Smith, and today we'll be talking about the communication framework for USD 420. Okay, today we'll go over our goals, which are to build and maintain trusting relationships with our public, focus on being strategically aligned with our goals and our communications, and then also empowering staff to be ambassadors of those communication goals. So, internal and external publics. Publics are people who share a common interest or concern. So, when we're talking about that, internal publics would be um, like staff members or people who are in the same organization, and this would be them communicating with one another. When there are communications with members of the organization and outside parties, that would then be external publics. The goal of internal publics is to share information between people in the group or organization. And formats for that are somewhat similar to the external, but and you'll notice there's some asterisks. Those are two-way communication methods. But predominantly in person happens a lot, and they tend to be more informal rather than formal. So those are the methods of communication that typically are used for internal publics. When we're talking about external publics, we want to focus on maintaining relationships and exchanging information with people outside of our group. Now, when we are talking about these, that I have listed multiple other ways because we typically, instead of providing the information in one way, we send it out in multiple ways in order to reach different groups of people who may or may not be accessing information the exact same way. So this is in an effort to make sure that we are getting to folks that maybe don't have internet or maybe are not using a phone, that kind of thing. Communicating. So, who are the internal publics and who are the externals? So, some folks fit in both categories, but it really can depend on what they are doing at that point. So, our school board may communicate with staff members in one way, but they may communicate with community members in a different way, or they may be communicated with differently as an external public than they would be as an internal public. So those are some things to think about. Folks that we have close business relationships or partnerships with may be communicated with on both formats, and parents can fit into the both sometimes. Students can fit into the both sometimes as well. Successful communication strategies. I thought this was really important to hit on because communication is great, but it can be done wrong. So they had some great tips at Hampton City Schools. So they focused on keeping the information simple, keeping it timely, meaning like early and often, being proactive, so to speak. Communication that is face to face, the more difficult or challenging the conversation to be had or information to be given, the more important it would be to do that face to face, if at all possible. Making sure we're brief and to the point, and we've checked for spelling errors and things like that, and maybe we follow a similar district-wide format. We need to focus on customer service, so being respectful and listening, training staff to be great communicators and great receivers of communication. We need to develop relationships with our different publics, and then study the media. There's lots of different things that formats for communication that keep coming out, lots of new ones. And they may not all be right for our district, but it is important to consider those and be aware of those. And then we want to maybe set some preset messages ahead of time, and then that makes that much easier to communicate early and often. Two-way communication, as I spoke about earlier. I loved this saying here, dialogue is not a process or a series of steps. It is a product of ongoing communication and relationships. And that's what we're trying to build is the relationship piece. So we really need to make sure that we are having opportunities for two-way communication. They really focused on 5 elements for dialogue and talking about having an orientation of collaboration, making sure that that is one of the goals or focals, and then making sure that we're consulting publics on issues that may affect them, considering them essentially, making sure that we're supportive and acknowledge other people, respect and understand vulnerability, and consider unanticipated risks. And then talk about a little bit about our commitment, making sure that we're holding conversations for the benefit of both parties involved, not just ourselves. So here is our framework chart for communication, and so I've listed the publics across the top, and then I talked about whether they would be considered internal or external typically, and I indicated that, and then I also indicated what would be the primary mode of communication with those folks in there, and then just to consider two-way communication and then also the frequency. I think faculty and staff and administrators probably communicate pretty frequently via email, but then how are we communicating with parents and community members? So being predictable with that, knowing as public that there's going to be a monthly newsletter, and that if there's changes in the ball game because of rain, that will be posted on our Facebook page, the website, and parents will get a text as well. So making sure that it's predictable and that we're getting things out in a timely time frame, is key. And I think that really cuts down on frustrations from parents as they're trying to coordinate their life in addition to the parenting role. So when we're talking about our internal and external publics, I did indicate down here with asterisks, as I said before, which ones really provide for more opportunities for two-way communication. And you'll see for internal, a lot of that happens face-to-face in a hallway, whereas when you're talking about the general public, there's sometimes less opportunity for in-person. But I did add surveys down here, and we do send those out in multiple formats. So I think that's been a good one. Also, email and in-person, social media. Sometimes they turn that into a two-way format. So that is our communication framework for USD 420. And then I will go over my standards. So when we're talking about our chart and making sure that we covered that, I did consider the needs of diverse families when I was looking at my chart and making sure that we do provide multiple formats for communication for the same information, because not everybody has the same access or just habits to check the same things for updates or information. So I think that's very important, and that definitely correlates to our PLO of making sure that we are supporting and promoting the success of all students. Relevancy, I think it's key to make sure that we have a collaborative culture, and in order to do that, we've got to build trust within our community and with our students. So this assignment really helped me learn the difference between internal and external. I really hadn't thought of it in that way before, but the framework is really helpful for me to understand, and it does create some boundaries and expectations, and I think that can be really helpful. So we can make some positive changes around our community. And then my personal reflection would be this was a really good assignment for me. I really prefer to two-way communication, because I always want to make sure that I'm understood and that I'm understanding other people correctly. I think in order to help make communication go smoother, I would like to create a communication framework for our district. Once I get to know a little bit more about them, this one I created without knowing too much about the new district just yet. And then also, I think it would be very, very helpful to train staff in how to handle communications. So there we go. Thank you very much. And then here are my references. Thank you. Have a great evening.